Please remain standing as I share the Easter story as it's recorded in the Gospel of John. Early in the morning of the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. She ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." Peter and the other disciple left to go to the tomb. They were running together, but the other disciple ran faster than Peter and was the first to arrive at the tomb. Bending down to take a look, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but didn't go in. Following him, Simon Peter entered the tomb and saw the linen cloths lying there. He also saw the face cloth that had been on Jesus' head. It wasn't with the other cloths, but was folded up in its own place. Then the other disciple, the one who arrived at the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They didn't yet understand the scripture that Jesus must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to the place where they were staying. Mary stood outside near the tomb crying. As she cried, she bent down to look into the tomb. She saw two angels dressed in white seated where the body of Jesus had been, one at the head and one at the foot. The angels asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" She replied, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they put him." As soon as she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" Thinking it was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I haven't yet gone up to my Father. Go to my brothers and sisters and tell them, I'm going up to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene left and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord." Then she told them what he had said to her. And God add abundant blessing to our understanding of the Holy Word. Please be seated. If you came early, I need to ask how you did with the trivia, but I won't ask. But I am going to start my very brief Easter reflection with a trivia question. Here it is, and feel free to use it with Easter dinner. Here it is. Who was the only person, there was one, who appears at the empty tomb in all four Gospels? And here's some hints. In Matthew's Gospel, 2 women appear and no disciples. In Mark's Gospel, 3 women and Peter arrives later. In Luke's Gospel, 3 women appear and no disciples. In John's Gospel, 1 woman. Peter and John arrive later. The only person who appears at the empty tomb in all 4 Gospels is Mary Magdalene. This much maligned Mary Magdalene, a Jewish woman from the fishing town of Magdala, whose name appears in the Gospels 12 times, more than most of the disciples. Jesus healed her from demon possession. She traveled with Jesus and witnessed his crucifixion, his burial, and his resurrection. She is the first eyewitness of the risen Christ and was commissioned by Jesus to inform the disciples of what she saw. We know that Mary Magdalene must have loved Jesus deeply. We know also that Jesus must have trusted her completely, because he shared with her the most important news in human history. Think about that. news in all of human history was shared by Mary Magdalene. So I'd like to just spend a moment with this Mary Magdalene of the resurrection, that by taking a look at her history, seeing what we might learn today on Easter 2019, and the first thing that popped out to me was this, that she shared her discovery first and foremost with the fellowship. Let me unpack that just for a moment. This speaks of her loyalty to both Jesus and the disciples. Because at that tomb, Mary Magdalene had another option. She could have gone and shared the news with her enemies, with the Jewish and Roman leaders, but instead she remained loyal, undeterred, and faithful. And this is a lesson, my dear friends, often lost in the present-day church, where relationships often give way to personal agendas, judgment, suspicions, and opinions. Mary Magdalene witnessed that her top priority was her relationship with Jesus and the relationship with her faith community, the disciples. And as a pastor, I am often amazed at how easily our loyalty sways. It sways when someone has a different point of view. It crumbles and sways and we leave when someone challenges our theology. Oh my Lord. Or we have a misunderstanding, which is often a result of miscommunication. But Mary Magdalene of the resurrection would have none of that. She remained loyal, steadfast in her love with Jesus and her community. And then there's angels. Angels. Now, I am not going to define for you this Easter morning the United Methodist theology of angels. But rather, I would like to delineate the actions between Peter and John and Mary Magdalene. In our passage, we learn that the two disciples arrive on the scene, assess the situation, and then return home. Scriptures do not expand their conversation when returning home. Well, wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall? When they told the other disciples what they saw. But Scripture does painstakingly describe a conversation with the one who stayed behind. Mary was willing, available, and ready to endure the moment, whatever that moment brought about. Amidst her tears, heartache, and confusion, she wrestled with her present reality. Her love and loyalty did not allow her to retreat, but rather to stand in faith, to question, listen, and learn. And the blessing for her in this discovery and in her loyalty is that she was able to recognize the very voice of Jesus when Jesus called her name. There is little doubt that even Mary did not comprehend right away, thinking that Jesus was the gardener. But the lesson I take from this is that she was still there. She stood firm. She was present. She was hopeful, no matter what was about to happen. And it was only then, when Jesus called her by name, did she have clarity and understanding. And her recognition brought forth the word Rabboni, meaning teacher. The very one she loved, the very one she learned from, the very one she deemed as Lord. So on our Easter 2019, my dear friends, we have the wonderful opportunity today, right now, to assess our living relationship with the risen Jesus through the example of Mary Magdalene. And we can do that by asking two final questions. I end with this. The first question is Jesus calling my name? Is Jesus calling your name on this Easter morning? Now, I know that's a tricky thing to ask. I shared several times from this pulpit that I have a habit when I'm driving in the car to talk to myself. Anyone else know me like that? I'm constantly talking to myself, disagreeing with myself. That's why I love cell phones now. It just seems like you're talking on the phone. And I have never once, as I've been in the car, heard the voice of Jesus say, "Hey Mark, take a left, it's a shortcut." I've never heard anything like that. However, the Spirit of Jesus calls my name every time I turn a blind eye to suffering. The presence of the risen Jesus calls my name every time I find it easier to judge someone than to love them. The truth of Jesus convicts me every time I choose cruelty over grace. How about you? You see, friends, He calls our names so that we might share what Mary Magdalene shared on that first Easter morning when she proclaimed, "I have seen the Lord." Now, you and I may never see Jesus in an empty tomb like Mary, but let there be no doubt His presence is among us this morning. Amen. We see Jesus in our worship. We feel Jesus. We hear Jesus in our praise, our prayers, our acts of service. We feel the presence of Jesus in new life and even death. This event we call Easter, while historical, friends, is only relevant when we too, like Mary, give witness to how we see Jesus in our lives. The power of Easter is not in simply remembering the empty tomb, but the power of Easter is living our lives, seeing the risen Christ in everything we do. That's the power of Easter. That by what we think, what we do, and what we say, we proclaim to the world that Christ has risen.